Today we're hearing Jesus packing all the wisdom of the world into two short commandments. Two short commandments. Jesus, who is God incarnate, is giving us the meaning of life, the road to fulfillment, the way to happiness in today's gospel. But we have heard it so often that sometimes we have to make a special effort to really appreciate it or to continue to dive into its depths. And the very key word, the center of today's message, is that word, love. Love. Now, usually we associate this word with some pleasant feelings, intense and delightful emotions, but the word Jesus used means something far deeper, and that is agape. And maybe you've heard that word before, agape, which has a sense of self-sacrificial love. Self-sacrificial love. It refers to the love that means desiring union with someone and desiring and working towards that which is good for the other. So it's desiring union with someone and desiring and working towards that which is good for the other. That is agape. But the word agape isn't quite enough. Jesus wants to clarify it. He wants to make completely sure that we don't misunderstand. And so he explains how love applies to our two key relationships with God and also with each other. And so the first, he explains it out, right, as it is written in the Old Testament. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. In other words, with everything that you have, right? With everything that you have, everything that you are, every component of your being. And then he makes clear also, love your neighbor as yourself, right? It's good to love ourselves. We need to love ourselves. And also, we have that command to love others just as we love ourselves. This is true Christian love, and it's not some passing self-indulgent emotion, but it's actually a courageous lifestyle. It takes courage to put God first, to put others second, and to put self third. It takes courage to go against the grain in doing that, the grain of our own inclinations to serve only ourselves sometimes. And we see this truth vividly at work in the lives of the saints who gradually learn that Christian love is much more about what we decide to do than about how we feel about it. There's a remarkable saint, Pope Gregory the Great. He died in the year 604 after 13 years in the papacy. And he organized a large number of volunteers that he would send out into the streets of Rome in order to feed the hungry, take care of the sick. And he even took some of the poor families and sent them out to the neighboring farms around the city, leased it out to them for 3 generations, lifting so many out of poverty in the area. But he would do something else that was rather extraordinary. Every day, Pope Gregory the Great fed at his own table in his own home 12 poor pilgrims. And he insisted on doing the serving. He wouldn't allow the rest of his staff or waiters to serve these poor pilgrims. He himself would bring the plates. He himself would serve them. Now, one day when he entered the dining room to feed his guest pilgrims, he counted not 12, but 13 pilgrims. There was this 13th pilgrim. And he asked his steward, "Who is this extra guest that we have?" And the steward said to him, "There are only 12. What 13th person are you talking about?" But Pope Gregory insisted, "No, there are 13, and I see the 13th right there." And what he noticed about this 13th guest is that as the evening continued, the appearance of the 13th guest would change from a young man to a middle-aged person and to an elderly person. And it would change back and forth, back and forth. Finally, Pope Gregory was filled with with inquisitiveness. He had to know, who is this 13th person that seems so special? So he drew the strange man aside and asked him who he was. And the stranger answered, I am the angel of God. I am the angel of God sent to you to prove your charity. Now do not fear. God has sent me to you to be your guardian. Whatever you ask will be granted you through me. That was God's response to the charity shown by Pope Gregory. And that is Christian love, a tireless, self-forgetful effort to put one's talents, one's gifts at the service of God by serving our neighbors wherever God's providence puts us, whatever talents he gives us. And this is the secret to true joy and happiness, partly here on earth and complete in heaven. St. Therese of Lisieux wrote one time, Jesus flooded the darkness of my soul with torrents of light. Love filled my heart. I forgot myself, and henceforth I was happy. I forgot myself, and henceforth I was happy. Now, don't be discouraged if you don't love like this already, huh? The reason why is because it's a lifelong project. It's a lifelong project to learn to love like this, to love like Christ. It's actually the primary adventure of Christian living, an adventure initiated and sustained by God's grace, and also one that requires our cooperation with that grace. One of the reasons we haven't made progress, maybe, in this area has to do with the wrong idea that many of us might have. If we can correct this idea, Christian love will have much more room to grow and fill our lives with meaning and lasting joy. So what is this wrong idea? I submit to you that at times we tend to think that loving God and loving our neighbor are two separate activities, as if we love God with one spiritual muscle, which gets a workout when we pray and worship, and that we use a different spiritual muscle when we love our neighbor. But that's actually not true. The Pharisee asked Jesus for the single most important commandment, and Jesus answered with two. Now, why would he do that? Of course, the two commandments are distinct, but Jesus insisted on including that second. And the reason why is because at their foundation, they are the same thing. They are the same thing, because there is only one spiritual muscle that we use to love God and our neighbor, and that is the heart. The heart. This is why it is impossible for us to treat our neighbors, whoever they might be. They could be family members, colleagues, classmates. It's impossible for us to treat our neighbors the way we know we should unless we have a mature prayer life. The two are connected. Christian love for our neighbor requires seeing them the way God sees them. But we can only do that if our mind and our heart are full of God's vision, of seeing reality and seeing it as God sees it, so that we can see others as God sees them. And this happens through prayer, constant, insistent prayer. That's why the Catechism can say that we live as we pray. Today, Jesus will pour out his grace, pour out his love into our hearts once again in this Mass. And as he does this, let's beg him prayerfully to teach all of us not only to understand these two great commandments, but also to live them.